Agenda items. Mr. Dwelly, you need to grab a mic and
Just,
introduce yourself, please.
it's on. It's not live.
Bruce, are you okay?
Hello, test. Do I have to push the thing button? No?
That's for the recordings.
Oh, so you guys, you don't care about this. Okay.
The whole world can hear you.
Just looking for a status report on Concord.
And I assume you mean the subdivision? Yes. Yep. I was in Gartley Dorsey's office a couple weeks ago and ran into Jim Dorsey, and he mentioned to me that it was coming back alive, and he thought we'd have a submittal within the next month, as I recall.
What does that mean as far as the change in the ordinance?
Oh, okay. So when I was referring to the subdivision, I was just talking about the subdivision plan that was coming through. We had the planning board had a meeting, right, to talk about possible ordinance changes, and you attended that one. Nothing has moved forward yet. I'm going to be going to the select board likely. I was hoping the first meeting in October. It'll probably be the second meeting in October, just because of the how hefty that agenda is going to be on the first. And we're going to discuss priorities for the select board and ordinance changes and going that I should work on for the fall, winter, and spring for take voters into June. And that would be one of the ones that I'm going to bring to their attention and ask for them to
At our last
prioritize.
meeting, you said you were going to do that.
Correct. I did. I haven't done it yet. The select board has not. We have talked about getting me in to do a priority work session with them, and it just has not happened yet. So it will happen in October, because I can't keep this going into November. The way these things work, it takes so much time to get them going. So I pretty much have to have everything done for March in order to be in June. Yes, I'm on it.
Do you need any help from anybody?
I will reach out to you if I do, and I can let you know when that agenda will be. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other public comments on non-agenda items? No? Okay, so let's move on to the site plan review. It's a pre-application meeting, so I'm going to hand this over to the applicant or to Jeremy.
You can hand it over to me, I guess, and I'll hand it right over to Will. This is just a, pre-application meeting. Pre-application meetings are not required by the ordinance, but they are encouraged. And since this project did go to the Zoning Board of Appeals already, and it is a pretty significant project, although square footage area on the footprint on the ground, it's shrinking. It is a project that's on the harbor, so I encouraged Will to do a pre-app meeting. And here he is. And so if you want to just explain what you got going.
Yep. All right. Good evening, everybody. So I'm representing Lyman Morse, and in this case, it's Camden Properties, CLC Camden LLC, that owns the property. The boathouse at the head of the harbor is pretty well known. It's a red building. It's got a little bit of a sloped roof to it. And what they're looking to do is completely take that down and replace it. As Jeremy said, the footprint will be a little bit smaller than what's there now. I've got on the plan a dashed line that shows the existing building footprint, and we're shrinking that down a little bit to simplify it. A portion of the building is on piles, and it will continue to be that way. That gives us the minimum impact below high tide to maintain the building there. We went to the zoning board because Article 12 of the ordinance under Section 6, reconstruction of buildings that are in the shoreline zone, require us to go through that process to look at, is there a way to move this back any further, to the greatest practical extent, and that's what the zoning board had to determine. As you can see on here, there's not much room. We're pretty tight, and the grades are pretty steep coming down into this parking lot. Harborhead LLC, where it says Unit 1, is Rendell Jones and Jack Sanford's law office. And so that is a condominium, and those guys own that unit, so that's independent of this project. And so we don't have a lot of room to work with here. We also have underground sewer that comes through and underground power that goes out to the marina. So a lot of reasons, and the other thing is Atlantic Ave has a pretty significant granite retaining wall holding it up, and we really didn't want to get any closer than we are and take the risk of having to stabilize that or undermine it in any way. I included some photos that show you that end of the building, so you can kind of see how close we really are to that location. We're working with an architect that's out of Virginia. They're friends of the Lyman family, and so that's who, Greenspur is the name of the company. They've put together the preliminary elevations, and there was a public comment at the ZBA meeting asking us to keep the building red, so that will be continuing to be a red building.
Just pick the right shade, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I think it's relatively straightforward. I mean, the site is already developed. We're not looking to, exactly. Yeah, that was pointed to at the meeting. We said we would keep it in keeping with what's historically been there. We're not looking to really change the parking lot, the grading of the parking lot very much, mainly because we can't. I mean, this attaches to someone else's property, and it's so close that we really can't do a lot with the grades. We are going to lift the lower level floor a little bit. It is sunken in right now, and so the bottom floor is going to be at between 12 and 12 and a half. We're still trying to work that out. Flood elevation is 11, so we have to be at least 12. Highest annual tide we've got shown there is just about 7. We're going to try to minimize the number of piles. On this original plan, we were just kind of showing a layout that was similar to what's under there, but I think we've got it to the point where we can do 3 rows and minimize the total impact. So that'll help us with our DEP and Army Corps permit.
Oh, instead of 4, yeah.
Yeah. We will have, there is an existing retaining wall to the east side of the building, all along the parking lot. And right now, that wall and the building are independent, so there's like a little gap that things get down into and water gets down into. It's really a hassle to maintain. So we're going to replace that timber retaining wall with a cast-in-place foundation wall that will be the retaining wall and the support for that side of the building. Otherwise, like I said, we've got all the utilities are there, power's there, water's there, underground sewer. We'll remake the connection there. The project's pretty straightforward. I've gone through all the submission requirements and started for the complete submission, and don't see us having any trouble meeting any of those. With regards to the performance criteria, the only one that I don't necessarily feel like it applies, but I wanted to ask you guys at this meeting, was the landscaping. There is some landscaping on site. We have a little bit of a buffer between the parking and the northeasterly abutter, and we're not planning on touching any of that. Otherwise, we really don't have much land. Everything, the only open area is grass right now, and that's the area to the kind of northwest of the building. But a good portion of that is below the floodplain, so we really don't want to be planting or disturbing that area down there. So I just wanted to make sure that you were in agreement with me that there's not a lot that we're going to be changing.
Well, so there's the existing building footprint, and then the difference between the two, what's going to go in there?
We would just hope to seed that area.
Seed mold,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the, I think I've got a couple photos that show what that looks like now.
It's going to be underwater.
And it's not maintained, it's just a natural grass area. They don't mow that. In fact, the photo 6 shows you what it looks like down there. On that side of the building.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe we hold off on making that decision until the site walk.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
I think that
think that's a good point. Can I make just a comment? What I'd like to see, and I appreciate where that retaining wall is, and you say it's a grassed area now, right?
Yeah. This is talking about in here?
Well, I think, not really there, but my thoughts were parking and landscaping, buffering, street right-of-ways.
Oh, here.
Yes. And what I'd like to see is make sure you meet that parking, that landscaping requirement. It's not, it's not a lot of plant material that's required there. If you look at,
Yeah, I mean, what's tough is that we don't have much room there.
No, I know.
The other thing is that the road is 9 to 10 feet above.
I get that. I mean, I'm not wanting you necessarily to buffer from I mean, it does say, when a parking area that includes 5 or more spaces abuts a public right-of-way, you are abutting it. It doesn't speak to the height of it, right? But it talks about being 6 feet wide, which I think you've got 6 feet there.
Yeah, we do. For portion of it, yep.
Yeah, and it doesn't, I mean, if you look at how many trees are required, shall be planted with at least one canopy tree per 35 feet, linear feet of street frontage or a fraction thereof. So you're not talking a lot of plant material or trees. See my point?
Yeah, the problem, though, is that's going to put it directly under those overhead power lines. So I don't think we want to be planting canopy trees right.
Well, keep in mind what a canopy tree is. All it is an 1.5 inch caliper. And I think you can probably maintain that at a certain height or get a tree that does not grow that tall. Just throwing that out there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly do that. I mean, we're really going to be buffering the wall from the parking.
Right.
We're not going to be really buffering the parking from Atlantic Ave.
I'm just reading through how the ordinance reads. And then there's a section on abutting residential, and you do abut some residential, right?
We do on the
Yeah.
northeast side. But I mean, that's been that way for a long time. There is
Yeah.
plantings up there, and we're not touching any of that area.
Yeah. Can you look at it and just look at what the ordinance requirements says and see if you can meet that, or maybe you meet that already? I mean, this is only for every 100 feet, you got 2 canopy or evergreen trees and 4 understory and 6 shrubs. It's not a lot. You may be there already.
Well, I don't think we're there, but I also don't think that butter is going to want their view blocked. I think we're going to be causing problems by doing that.
Couple of oak trees?
The lower level.
But you'll see, it's not very big.
I
and
hear
There's
you.
already so much there that
I
I
hear
don't
you.
think you're going to want to see anything else. So I think the site walk is going to be helpful,
And it probably will.
because there are trees along that
Yeah,
property line.
yeah.
What if there's like a privacy fence?
Well, they have a retaining wall that's right on the property line.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Why don't we look at it when we go for a
Say-
walk?
It would be
Site walk.
good to stand there on the site and look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a usual situation. When you've got a
It's
million,
not.
when you've got $1 million view. I mean, that's one of the
get
things you're
that.
dealing with.
So they did hold a neighborhood meeting, and they invited all the abutters, just to let them know ahead of time what was going on, so that they didn't just see it in the paper and get something in the mail ahead of time that they'd be wondering about. And the one concern that everybody had was not impacting their view any more than we have to, so. And the building height's been a question too, because of how funky it is, and if you do the calculation of average grade around the building, we exceed the maximum height, but under the reconstruction section in the ordinance for non-conforming, we can maintain the existing height. So we measured the existing ridge, and we're not going any higher than the highest point of that existing ridge. We are going to make it level, though, so that it's not going to continue to be an overall sloping building.
Would you walk me through the residential area of this building? Is it the entire second floor?
Second floor.
Entirety?
Yep.
Okay.
Did I hear you correct, that your highest point right now is actually above the requirement or the maximum?
Right.
But you're planning to continue the new roof at that height,
Right.
as opposed to bringing it down to conformity? How many feet are we talking there from that? very-
I think that it was about, in fact, I have those calculated.
Remember, that's why they went to the zoning board of appeals,
That was through them, okay?
right? That was the replacement, yeah, the height couldn't be increased. Right.
The building height is a code, it's a building permit, code office issue, but I do have that, so I can tell you what it is. Right, 24 feet, and I think that where our actual
Says 2896?
building, yeah. So I knew we were about 4 or 5 feet.
And it has to do with how we define height.
Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, it's the average original grade
Yeah.
measured every 10 feet around the building. So that means that what's controlling is actually the elevation out in the water. That's what's bringing us down. That makes it seem like it's a taller building because part of this building is out over the water, which means I'm actually measuring below the high tide line to determine that average original grade. If I measured from the parking lot side, then we'd be well under it. But because the average original grade includes the area that goes below high water, it brings that average down, which means then when I measure up to the peak, because if you look at the photos and you look at that building, it's not a real tall building.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't feel tall unless you go down at low tide.
EH.
When you straighten out that roof line, your height at the water will be much greater than what it
Right.
is now.
Right.
Correct.
Yep.
Approximately 5 feet, is that the one?
Yep.
And non-residential lots, well, I'm just, what's the in the development table, what do you got as the max height allowed there, Will?
I don't have the development table in front of me. I think it was 24 feet though.
Or, right,
So why isn't it 32?
because it's not one story,
Right. There's a lot of,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
right, if it was a single-story building and it was just the marine use, it could be 32 feet,
It can be 32 feet.
which I would be under. But because it's a two-story building and there's a residential use in it, it can't be more than 24 feet, or whatever the max current height is. And the height definition in your ordinance measures from the original ground up to the highest point of the ridge. So that's how height's defined.
There is a whole page definition on building height in our definition section.
Basically, you're within what you're doing is allowed according to our ordinances.
Right. We've spent quite a bit of
Yeah.
time reviewing this with Steve and Jeremy to.
Yeah.
See, I'm having a hard time comprehending that, because when you're at the water's edge, your height is actually much higher on the new building. So when you do your height measurements, like you're doing the existing building to determine the height, when you do those same calculations for the new building, it would seem the numbers just don't jive.
Well, it doesn't,
get it.
yeah, but the way it's defined in the ordinance is the vertical measurement from a point on the ground at the average original grade adjoining the foundation to the highest point of the building or structure. It doesn't say to the average of the roof or to
I
the
see.
lowest and the highest, it just says to the highest point. So the definition of height is to the highest point, and we're allowed to maintain whatever the current height, maximum height is. It's weird, but that's the way.
I'll study and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's a formula. You kind of plug in the numbers and it either works or it doesn't, doesn't
Right.
it? And,
And
you
so
know,
in our case,
yeah.
what we did is calculated the average original grade, measured up to the highest point of the ridge, got an elevation, it's greater than the 24, and so that height is what we're able to maintain, because the ordinance under the non-conforming structures sections also says that you have to maintain what you're allowed or what you currently have that's grandfathered. Right, so we're allowed to maintain the elevation that we have.
You know,
We
maybe,
can't go higher.
You know, it may be helpful, Will, as I recall, you did a drawing showing that height, or where you measured every 10 feet.
Oh, yeah, I actually
Right.
have a copy right here.
I think that may be helpful to be included in the packet when it gets submitted.
I can take a copy.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a little scratch.
Right, right.
But basically, we just went around the building every 10 feet and figured out what the existing ground was at that location. And then took that average and measured up to the ridge. The critical piece is the height of the ridge. Because that's what we have to maintain, regardless of what this calculation ended up being. This doesn't really govern anymore because we're maintaining the existing. If I was able to go, if my existing was less than what's allowed and I was able to go a little higher, then this would become really important, because that'd be the number that we would all have to agree that I would be starting from. But in this case, what's really important is the elevation of the ridge. And then I can't go higher than that. Because it's already there.
And you are reducing the mass slightly. So while
Reducing the
there's-
footprint.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's not quite as big a building as it
Right.
is now.
Right.
While it's staying the same height.
Yep, it's actually a fair amount. I think we're reducing the width by 5 or 6 feet. Which means overall mass and volume are definitely shrinking.
I know this issue came up at the zoning board of appeals, and, you know, neighbors came to that, and I think there were some folks that were concerned about what it would look like and what the view would be. We have a provision in the ordinance for a view corridor, and I was going to ask Will about that, or at least to show that on a plan potentially. And I think what might be helpful, Will, also would be if you can get an illustration of what the building would look like from C Street.
Oh, from C Street, sure.
Well,
From C Street or Atlantic?
Atlantic, sorry.
put together something that could explain the height
Yep.
a little more in depth for us.
Yep, in the,
Well, I think, I mean, you're saying this one here
yes,
is the one that shows the average original grade elevation, correct?
yes.
So right here, this line right here. So the measurement from there to the top. This number here. Figuring average original grade is basically taking that, it's on the slope like this, it's sort of taking the average from there, right, kind of, and
Yeah, and I've got it labeled what we came up with. It's 8.54, which, when you look at what the first floor elevation is and the parking lot on the other side, I mean, at the north end of the building, the grade as we go into the building is at elevation 18. And then as you come south towards the harbor, it drops down, but the lowest the parking elevation gets to currently is 13. And so 8.54, you know, we're anywhere from 4.5 to 10 feet below what the parking elevation is. So it's a strange situation in this case, but 8.54 is pretty low. And then our ridge is at 37, so our total building height right now is 28.96. But again, if this was a one-story building, I could go even higher. Right, so I could take this building down and replace it with just a big boat shed that could be 3 feet higher than this, which is a little odd, but, so I don't feel like necessarily that us leveling out the ridge is really that big of a deal, considering that I could tear this building down and go to 32 if it was one story.
Oh, I understand that. I just kind of like to
Yeah. It is
clarify
confusing,
it
and we
see
spent a
it-
lot of time.
See it in black and white and
Yeah.
understand.
What else could we
what it
provide
means.
you that would be helpful? I mean, I know because we've got it all labeled on these elevations. I can show a plan where the spots go every 10 feet around the building and the math that goes with that.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
goes up and
I've shown the maths before where you add it up and go, here we are, and then we
Yeah,
divide
I can
it by the number of
We've done it,
things,
so it's
right?
easy for me to
And
give it to you.
put it there and everybody can see it. Why not?
My question is, I mean, it's, if the building is over the water, do you measure it at low tide? Your elevation, or would you
It's the
measure
average
it?
grade, so.
Yeah.
No, the
I mean,
tide, the
but would
water
you-
height.
Well, I would love to do that because it makes it better for us.
So what do you measure? I was
I
interested in
measured
that.
the actual elevation of the ground because the definition says the average grade. And so in this case, it's below high water, so, I mean, the higher that original average grade is, the better it is for us because it gets us more height.
Yeah.
But I would need it to be 4 or 5 feet higher before it would make a difference. So in this case, the average original grade isn't critical because it doesn't govern. The existing ridge of the building is what governs.
This photo here, is that taken from Atlantic Ave, or is that?
That's
How
taken
close
from,
is that to the neighbor's property, the Fisher property? Is there a house on that lot?
there is,
I mean, my only concern really, it doesn't seem like the height is all that unreasonable, but if you drew a line, what I'm guessing is if you draw a line from here, which is your high point, and you straighten that out, you're gonna end up taking a wedge.
Yep.
Runs almost parallel to the horizon line there of view.
right.
That's my only thought, is that you are gonna fill in some space there where you're gonna lose some actual.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to lose a
Not
view
much,
of
but
the
like-
trees on the other side. I mean, I think
Part of the harbor, or the town.
yeah, I'm
Right,
not sure. I think you're,
That's what's hard to envision, is what.
yeah, and that's another good reason for the site walk,
Yeah,
because I think we can stand up there and
right.
and see
The
what,
neighbors were at the Fishers were at the zoning board meeting, and they were appeased by the height issue.
I actually don't think they were.
Yeah.
I know that, that they were at,
Mary Gilbert was there.
yep, and she lives on the other side, or she doesn't actually live there, it's a rental, but she has a place on Atlantic.
And another butter, and they were in support. They wanted to see the improvements. Most of these.
Really, you know, we've done a lot about heights and a lot of numbers so far, but I think it's, what I see of this, like, there's some dramatic places where good architecture will really be able to stand out. And I've looked at the work of this green spur, it's very exceptional, very good work. And I think what Lyman Morris has done traditionally in this town, I think they're always concerned about how something's going to work and how it's going to look. So I'm just throwing that in as opposed to all the numbers that we've been discussing tonight, that there's a more subjective part to this too.
And you're saying, just to be clear, that you'd be in favour of this in terms of
Well,
its,
I know pre-F's not supposed to do that, but I'm just asking us to take a look at other aspects, like building elevations, not grade elevations. And, you know, like this shot right here, it's, you come down that street and there's that opening there, you're going to see what's there.
so, I mean, that's a great point. I wonder if we've finished discussing, I just want to make sure that we've finished discussing the height issue before we move on to any other discussion of any other
Yeah, I mean, I think
potential.
the sidewalk will be helpful. I think the reason why I raised the issue is I think we need to exercise caution when we're raising the height of a building that's already over the maximum height. And I know maybe described in the ordinance per se, but there's like a view corridor, there's things like that. So I just think it bears paying attention to. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch, but I think that we should be very careful about raising the height of buildings that are already over the maximum height. Even if it's not raising the highest point, it's still raising the bulk, of a large portion of the building to some degree.
Yeah.
Like
Some of it up
like
to
I
5
said,
feet.
you know, in your packet, if you could just add something that really drives that home, so we understand it's solid.
Don't know if you could even dot in on the architectural gable ends. I know they're going to shrink slightly,
Oh, an existing.
right? If you just dotted in like this gable elevation here, right, it's actually going to be, it's going to,
Be less of a
the existing one is slightly bigger, right?
Right.
And just having that as a dotted line on here.
Oh, okay.
Right, at either end would help people understand that the mass is getting, it's just a very quick visual way to demonstrate that.
And do the same on the side
So
view as well?
that's a good point,
Yeah.
Rosie.
Side views may stay, I don't know, but anywhere that it's shrinking, just having that
both
outline
gables
is
would be
helpful.
Side view would adjust the height issue. You also have the dotted line.
Yeah, I mean, even the height issue too. I mean, just dotting in the existing conditions, I think would be tremendously helpful for everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, on this plan right here. I don't know
Right.
If you had the existing.
I showed you the,
Just the line.
Line of-
Yeah,
Yep.
then we can see it instantly.
Not in the existing.
yeah.
Good stuff.
Any other,
Yeah, and this is really a view piece. In one of the development standards, talks about the view corridor. Now, remember, this zone's allowed maximum building coverage of 100%. That said, it is subject to Article 812E3, which is for a view corridor with an area equal to 20% of the total lot area. And when you look at that section, it's not from people's properties, it's from street. So what I would surmise that you're probably increasing that view corridor from what you currently have, based on how Rosie just explained. That building is not out into the water as much, it's shrinking. But if it's possible on your plan to, or somewhere in a note, show what that view corridor is, Will, or what you've got for lot area. It says it's got to be 20% of the lot area, and I'm thinking off Atlantic Avenue, you've got two big swaths there of land that are a view corridor. And it doesn't talk about view corridors from people's properties, it talks about view corridors from street. So
Yeah, this
I'm
is
just
one
pointing
where-
that out there, that I think they certainly meet that standard on this lot. I mean, the lot, I know it's got a little long skinny piece that runs along the back of like 3 lots there. But I think it's important to show that you are appear to be meeting that view corridor section. If you don't mind showing that somehow on a plan.
That's easy. Yep.
Okay.
yeah, good idea.
So, on the west side, what are those outcroppings there?
So those are going to be cantilevered, so there's no structure below them that goes all the way down to the ground or into the water, but they're just a way to get some additional light and interest along that side of the building. Yeah,
All right, I couldn't figure out if they were
yep, they're
interior
just bump
space
outs
or
that have
exterior.
windows. So as you,
Both floors,
yes,
first and second? floor?
yep. I was going to say, which,
Bring us into a discussion, a non-binding discussion of elevations and just.
if you look at the west elevation, then you can see how those are, I mean, they're angled, so it's a little hard on a 2D elevation. But we'll have some perspectives that will include also some renderings.
Large second floor, 50% of the building. Is it, how many, one unit?
One unit.
One
Yeah.
unit?
Yep.
The building's what? How many
Well,
square feet is
so-
that? 4,100?
Well, the issue, though, is that, so at the north end of the building, we're coming into the building, there's an overhead door. If you look at the west elevation, east elevation, sorry.
Yeah.
At the east elevation, you see that we actually don't have 2 full floors at that end of the building, just because of the parking lot grades.
So are they big doors? Are they big sliding doors? Is that what those
There's,
crisscross?
yep, those are going to be overhead doors. I'm not sure what the actual, whether they're going to be overhead or sliding. But the intent there is to have some space in there that they can pull in either vehicles or boats or just storage. And then that'll be at a mid-level between floors, and then you'll go up to get to the actual second floor, which will be about where the retaining wall is, down.
So that's,
So that end of the building's really only
that's
one.
going to be intended for a garage, for the living space.
Possibly.
Marine use.
It could be, or it could be marine use, yeah. They
I would-
haven't completely,
Just a comment, what I'd like to see on the plan is proposed uses on the floors, so like on a, so that we know what the uses are. And there is a provision, and I think you're aware that in the BH, you can't have residential accessory uses on the first floor. So just throwing that out there. It's likely boat storage, those kinds of things. The ordinance does allow, as I recall, seasonal parking in buildings that are used for boat storage. So I assume seasonally in the summertime, you can use those for parking, but I'm just throwing that out there, because
Right.
you can't technically have a residential, accessory residential use on the first floor. So a garage, if it's dedicated to that residential use on the second floor, that doesn't work. Or storage for the residential use, but, you know, it is a Lyman Morse building, so.
What's it going to be clad with?
pardon?
What's the cladding going to be?
On the exterior, I'm not exactly sure. I'll find out.
No, it's going to be red, but red
Right.
what?
Fire engine red.
A fire engine red, indeed. It's a specific shade, you know.
Have you looked at their website, the architects?
No,
You
no.
don't try it. I must say, in several years of being a licensed architect, this is one of the few times I've run into a scale where 3/32 of an inch equals a foot. You know? I'm not sure I have a scale that it's going to be able to accommodate that.
Bump it up to a quarter inch for the builders, all right?
I joke.
I will make sure that we submit full-size plans that are at a more
Yes,
reasonable
okay.
scale. That was because of the 11 by
Yeah,
17s. That's like DOT using 1 inch equals 25
Just got to
feet.
indulge us occasionally.
Yeah, they're real helpful. Those things, yeah.
DOT does
At
it.
3/32, like,
It doesn't exist on most.
Design engineer
how
role
would you
for
get,
that.
like, 10 feet? It'd be 32/32.
The scale
Isn't that
rule,
what-
does it have that on it? All right, we're done giving them a hard time about the scale. Is there anything else? Are there any other comments on anything to do with aesthetics at this point?
With the what at this point?
I mean, I want to keep moving through.
Yeah.
The pre-application
Yep.
review. Does anybody have any other comments on any other aspects of this project? No? Okay. Have we reviewed everything?
Just so you know, what I plan to do is, I plan to meet with Will. I know this was not their formal submittal, and just to go through our standards and make sure everything is on the plan before they get it. I mean, there are things that, I'm sure they'll have it on the plan, but, we've got 3 lots. This lot, like a little spaghetti, piece of spaghetti goes down along the harbor, and I want to make sure that we pick up that entire piece. The ordinance requires it, and then we got to show who those abutters are and all that stuff. And I know you got it. I just wanted to let you know that I'll go through this.
Okay.
I'll go through the ordinance requirements, submittal requirements, make sure they're all there before it gets submitted.
I assume there's no stamp or anything.
And we'll work through the checklist at the next meeting, right, the formal application.
This is a condo property,
It's already a condominium.
so
It's an existing condominium.
Really?
As it's-
People live
no,
No.
that's just the way it's divided.
there? Okay.
And who's in the condo, the law firm?
It's just the law firm and Lyman Morse now, or Camden Properties LLC,
Yeah.
and CL Camden LLC.
So I guess my question would be, would that affect it in any way? Being a condo, is there a condo, any stipulations in the condo association, or?
Those, not that I'm aware of, and those wouldn't be ours to enforce, really, but I'd leave Will to answer that question. I
Yeah,
assume
no,
they're
there's
on
no,
board.
there's no restrictions to them rebuilding this building. In fact, I think it explicitly allows them to rebuild it. I have a copy of the documents. I'm not sure if you want all of them, but like I said, I don't think they necessarily apply, but there's nothing in there that prohibits them from doing what they're doing.
Are they including the right title interest that you're going to submit? Will they?
Right title and interest is just a copy of the deed
Yep.
that
Then-
Camden Properties and CL Camden LLC.
Okay.
Okay. But we tentative, I mean, is there any other comments? No. Through this, no?
Parking, maybe, is there?
Well, I was going to ask Kim about parking, and I was going to make sure that we've got parking sufficient to meet what the uses are, and that would show on a parking table or development
Yep.
table that I'm going to
Yep.
ask for.
I'll
so.
I'll include a parking analysis, so we'll list the square footage of each use, and residential just requires 2, it's not based on square footage, and then the other spaces are by square footage according to your table, so I'll definitely provide a list of what the different uses are and how much parking is required compared to
So
what we
the
have.
commercial space, is that, are you doing 4 different commercial spaces, or is this?
No, the entire thing is going to still be Lyman Morse. There's going to be probably in the middle of the building on the lower level, there's probably going to be a bathroom and an area for the marina users. So, a little lounge
facility.
area, shower facility, bathroom. And then on the south end of the building, it's probably going to still be like skiff storage, which is what a lot of that space is now. They just store a lot of skiffs in there. They've done historically outboard repair in that building.
On the south end?
On the south end.
The
Actually, the whole lower
water
level.
view?
The whole lower level. What's that?
To the water view?
Yeah. I mean, it's still a boatyard, and they're all, everybody that has things going on in the boatyard is fighting for space, so they want to continue to, plus they need to. I mean, it's what they want to keep it as a marine-related use and part of the boatyard. And they've got a marina right here at the head of the harbor that we updated just a few years ago, or a couple years ago. So there's a lot of boat activity here,
Right.
so. And then it'll be the upper 2/3 is where the apartment is.
So along the waterfront there, is that a new deck there?
Yes,
or that
it is. But that's, what we've done is brought the building in and replaced the footprint with deck. So we're not sticking out any further than what's already there. So everything that's deck is within the existing building footprint.
Are they gonna connect the dock system to this building?
We've talked about doing that. Not sure. I mean, we'd have to come back and do whatever we need to. It's been thought about, but we've also talked about maybe doing a ramp and being able to pull the dinghies right up into the lower level from the marina side. So there's been a lot of what-ifs.
I don't have any further questions.
I guess the last thing that I would raise, just for discussion, is you've got a building there that, yes, it's crooked, and yes, it's sort of an older building, but it is kind of a landmark in a way. I mean, it's been there for a long time, and we see it. And so people are saying, yeah, keep it red, but when, you're gonna see a pretty dramatic change on this building. It's not gonna look like an old boat shed anymore. It's gonna look like a brand-new, multi-million-dollar building with windows and jut-out stuff. It's definitely gonna impact the harbor aesthetically. Whether it's a positive or negative is really a personal decision, but I think it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to acknowledge that there is going to be a change. That's the reality of it, and like you say, it's up for discussion whether somebody would find that positive or negative. But,
There isn't much that goes through this board that doesn't represent a change.
No, I get that, but this is a significant, I mean, we're talking about right on the water. We're not talking
Yeah.
about, in a
Yeah.
private, this is, everybody that goes down and stands on the Harbor Walk area is gonna be looking right at this building.
Yeah.
So you know,
It behooves us to do due diligence and.
yeah, I
and
mean,
take
again, I'm
into
not throwing
account-
out any
yeah.
judgment on it, other than it is gonna represent a significant change. And, you know, if every building along there's not a lot more buildings there, but if every building along there looked like a brand-new built-up condo, that would look different.
I might just take issue with one word you just said, condo. I don't think that I know that this building is condominium ownership, but I don't think it's going to look like what most people refer to as a condo. You know, because it's like.
Well, you've got, I mean, it doesn't matter how many.
What does a condo look like? Explain to me what a condo looks like. Like there's
Well, it's a condo now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a condo. Right. So I'm not making a judgment based on condo necessarily, just, the whole top floor, well, it doesn't matter whether it's divided into 4 living units or 1.
Right.
Really, for the aesthetics from the outside, because there's no exterior access from those areas, so that doesn't really matter. It's, again, it's a question of, I think I've already said it, but aesthetically, is that a look that's
totally different. Yeah, I appreciate that, right.
I think I share your concern that as we upgrade, as a town upgrades
Right.
its fabric, these are long-term changes, and one would hope that the buildings that go in to replace the older buildings, which inevitably happen, it's part of the process of growth, and one would hope that those buildings are as sensitively designed as they can be and take into account the neighbourhood and everybody who lives around it, and that's part of our job as a planning board, to ask those questions and have that discussion.
I think what we might be looking for there is a drawing.
We're definitely going to have some renderings from different
Yeah,
angles and
exactly,
locations.
So we can get a feel for what it's going to be like, because they're very diagrammatic at the moment.
And
I think-
shades of red, right? And we really match.
Bring the Pantone colour.
That's our shade of red right there.
We got it.
Perfect. I have fire engine red. I know that colour. I can give you the sample if you want it.
I think these are all valid points and concerns. I think we need to make sure we remember what our approval criteria is and or what they are. And some of this is going into, because this is not one of those zones. It's not the B1 or BTH or BTR when we really get to start getting into aesthetics of buildings. Just throwing that out there. But I value completely what Ethan's saying and what you guys are
Non-binding
saying.
and recommendations, and we do what we can as a planning board to.
No, I mean,
Put
we
our
knew,
arms
we
around
knew
these
this, and it's very visible, and it's been Cabot and Heidi's intention to make sure that, you know, people are happy with what this looks like. We've spent quite a bit of time with Greenspur, and they've come here a couple times to see the site, and also look at what was happening just across the river with the old boathouse that's being totally rebuilt, that looks different than the old boathouse, but still similar. So, yeah, we've been paying attention to it. I think you'll, you know, be happy with what we bring in.
There was some conversation, Will, at the ZBA, and I don't have verbatim what the whole discussion was, but it was about habitat restoration. I just wanted to bring it up because that was talked about at the ZBA meeting. And so if you can just maybe look back at the ZBA meeting, and I will as well, just so we can try to somehow see what we can do with anything.
Yeah, it was definitely a public comment. It wasn't a condition. Or
Correct.
anything that
I'm
the
just throwing that
board
out
did.
there.
And we will be addressing that in our DEP and Army Corps
Yeah.
permit. But right now, underneath the building, below high water, it looks pretty similar to everything all around there up in the Inner Harbor. It's rock and a little bit of rockweed and that type of thing. Up under the building, above high water, is it's just kind of ugly under there. I mean, it's just rock and bare soil. So we're probably not going to be making a lot of change. What we are hoping to do, though, is clean the whole thing up, make those retaining walls, you know, so that they're not falling in, and reduce the number of piles and the amount of permanent structure that is below high water. So that's going to be a positive. And if there's any debris and old stuff under there, that'll all get cleaned up and restored. It's really hard to maintain vegetation under that building because it's shaded all the time.
Yeah, and you get a lot of sedimentation down in that area too, right? Coming down?
We have in the past, so that's another big improvement.
Coming down
So-
from-
Right. Because of the grade, as you come down into this drive and go by Unit 1, the law office, and that parking lot, it takes some sand and salt to keep it reasonable in the wintertime, which eventually that stuff, because of the way this is set up, it all runs to the building and down between the building and that timber retaining wall and eventually under. So we're going to put a solid concrete wall there. The pavement will come up against the concrete, and we'll put basins in there with sumps in them so that we catch the sand before the stormwater gets dumped into the harbor. So that's going to be an improvement too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I was also thinking of that stream is right near there, right?
Oh, yeah. that's-
Yeah, that-
We've got the big culvert right there.
Yeah,
It
and
comes up.
that dumps a lot of material coming off the mountain into there.
Which is why they just got a dredge permit
Yeah.
to deal with that marina area. Yeah. so
And
there's a lot of
I
sediment
say
there.
that because of the comment about habitat restoration. I mean, anything in that area is really impacted significantly, I would think, by that which comes down that stream. And there's a lot of material that comes down that stream every year.
Yeah. I mean, I'll make sure I include a plan that also shows the float layout in the marina so that you see what I know that you can in the aerial photograph that I included. But that area where the marina is dredged, and that comes right to the face of this building.
Right.
So,
All right.
this has been good, though. This is exactly why we have pre-app, right, to hear what everybody's
When
thoughts are.
when we mentioned some sort of illustration from Atlantic, can you get one from,
From the harbor?
well, from C too? People on the street, if I'm on the street, as I pull in the driveway, I can see the building, right?
I'll have to look.
It will change a little bit. I'm just curious if that,
I mean, it's not a
May be
great
helpful.
view from,
Yeah, I don't know if you
It's
can
so
really
far
see it.
down.
all right,
from
that's
C
fair.
Street. That's,
It's hard to, I don't,
You see the roof,
based on this.
pretty much.
All right. If there is no
People
view,
that
then
live
I don't
across
think.
from C Street right behind us. Can you see the building from your house?
Yeah, but there isn't much view from between Mike and Jan's house and what used to be Patina's house in the law office there. You're just seeing the roof and then the American Boathouse behind it.
Okay. All right.
I don't think you can see any harbor there.
All right, so maybe it's more important from Atlantic, just to.
I think
show something.
Atlantic and possibly from the harbor, looking back.
Any comments, Jeff? You good? All right.
so then on the note here for the 2008 highest annual tide, it says see note number 3.
Yep.
Note number 3
I know.
just
That,
has,
that's left over from the survey, so.
Don't read the notes.
Yeah, no, you'll have note number 3. I can tell you what it is.
sorry for being thorough.
It's not a standard plan yet.
No. That's just talking about the elevations are referenced in AVD 1988 based on static GPS observations performed on November 20th, 2012 and processed. So it's just talking about the datum that references the NOAA published elevation for highest annual tide. So you'll have the complete survey plan as part of the whole submission.
Wait.
So we should,
Matt, do you have any comments? Okay, so we're all,
I think it's
maybe, do you want to take some comments from the
So
public?
that was my next question. We've got
great.
a couple of members of the public. Is that permissible?
It's helpful.
If you'd like to
Ordinance.
speak, you're welcome to, and we just ask you to come up to the microphone, or we could give you, or we can hand you the microphone
Next one right here.
Just turn it on.
Yep.
and just state your name, if you wouldn't mind, for the record.
Etienne Perret, living at 14 C Street, diagonally across the street from the proposed building. I think in looking at this building, we always have to look at what are the potential uses and what is it now. And I think making this change will definitely change it from broken down rustic to a contemporary building. I have nothing against that. And the views from Atlantic Avenue is quite a bit higher at that point than the base of the red boat shed. So either way, I think the roof gets in, at some point blocks a portion of the harbor, but I don't see how that's a problem. I think it seems like a good idea. I don't see any big surprises in this. My only thing is I have a personal problem in that on private property, I don't know to what point it will be where towns decide what you can build.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Is there anybody else here who'd like to make any comments? No, thank you for coming. So I think
that's good. We should schedule, try to schedule the
Sidewalk,
site walk,
yes,
and
yes.
Jeannie had put it out there on this agenda already.
I don't know, yeah.
practically on staff is here all
Thank
the
you, Will.
time.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. What did Jeannie say?
The site walk happens first, usually, right? You're saying before the application meeting.
Well, it can.
If you go on to hold the public hearing the same night, if you find the plan complete, you can hold a public hearing immediately following, but you have to have held a sidewalk before you hold.
Wait,
So,
Right,
okay, so to keep to a schedule of being able to do two of these parts of the review in one evening, you need to hold a sidewalk before that.
which is why you've got them both down tentatively on 10/17. So if, I don't know, would everybody be available at 8 AM on that day?
And there's a reason that we're not doing 10-3 for a site walk? Did you do it earlier?
I'm sorry?
The reason why we wouldn't do 10-3 as a site walk?
No, there isn't any reason, it just needs to happen. They'll need to do a few things, probably layout.
I mean, I would argue in having
Actually, there's-
it on 10/17, just because it's fresh in our minds for the meeting that evening, but
Unless you have,
unless people can't make it.
17 is a Thursday. That's
It's a Thursday.
Regular
Make it,
scheduled
it
meeting.
won't give them a makeup opportunity.
So somebody, I mean, if that doesn't work for people, we could maybe look at 10/3. Yeah,
unless it comes about that there are things that come up at that meeting, the sidewalk,
Yeah, that's what I'm
that you want
thinking.
them to address.
Address. And there's not much prep for that site walk, right? I mean, it's not like.
No, so we're planning to submit the complete application materials on October 2nd. We can have the application into you ahead of that with the fee, but we were planning on getting everything in on the 2nd for the 17th meeting. So if we did have the meeting on the 3rd, and something came up that
That would give us.
you wanted additional information on, or that was different than what I had just submitted, it would definitely give us a chance to address it before the 17th, just to make that meeting go smoother.
I like that idea.
okay.
So
Not to mention, we've got more daylight the sooner we have it. And maybe a little warmer at 8 AM in the morning.
So the sidewalk on the 3rd?
Yeah, would that
Yeah,
work for everybody?
And that would give opportunity to make up if somebody missed it.
I don't know that you have anything on the agenda, you could meet at 5.
You can. I won't be here that day. I'm in Bangor all day at a conference, so I don't think you need me there at that site walk.
Technically, we don't, no. I mean,
It's not like a big
yeah,
subdivision.
there's-
Nope.
Yeah. Would everybody, so what would be the preference for
Well-
everybody? Morning or,
Morning?
That day's really inconvenient for me, but
Okay.
now I'm an alternate on this, so I don't think I have to be there.
Yeah, but you had some
Pardon me?
issues you wanted to look at, I think.
Sure. I could try to get there,
You
but
might
it's
wanna
just
be
going to
there
be
for a
really
second.
inconvenient.
I can also meet as, I'm not a board member, so I can meet Will on site separately. Talk with Will out there.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it on the 2nd. I mean, it doesn't have to be a
Fine for me,
Thursday, right?
but-
No, it doesn't. Just has to happen before.
I'm actually in Bangor on Wednesday and Thursday.
And Thursday.
Yeah.
We hear the first, 10-1, 10-1.
Go to the 17th. I mean, we do have to, we're not going to get it approved on the 17th. We'll have to be coming back to a final meeting to go through all the performance criteria. So if there are additional info that you want,
First?
we can,
Tuesday the 1st?
You won't have the plans,
Yeah, we kind of
Yeah.
need the plans.
So the 3rd?
but if they come in on the 2nd.
We can do Monday, the
We're
7th.
not, we don't have a
Tuesday,
huge
the
amount of
8th.
time to review the plans.
We could do
That's
any
my
day the
only
following
thought. I
week.
mean, I don't know how much time we need to review the plans, but
What day works for you the following week?
I'm actually out of town the following week.
Of course you are.
Well.
So I mean, we can go back to the 17th. I think
Well,
that's
let's do
fine.
it.
What about the 14th or 15th, and that gives them a couple days?
I like that. I'd like to at least,
Give him something.
especially if
14th
somebody
is
misses the
Columbus
meeting.
Day.
It's
Okay,
Columbus
how
Day,
about
but I could definitely do the 15th.
15th.
15th?
Any
yeah.
takers? I'm in.
8 a.m., 5 p.m., what's 8 a.m.? Can
8 a.m.?
8 AM?
8:15 at 8
all you
a.m.
gentlemen of
8
leisure?
a.m.?
Okay.
I'll
10:15.
send you a reminder.
15.
10,
15 at
8:15 on 10:15, yes.
8:15?
8:15.
8 a.m.
23.
8 a.m.
30 seconds.
on the 15th of October.
Is that long, extra
In the
time?
morning.
For you to sleep in?
Val,
Eastern Standard Time.
gosh, I wish.
Okay.
I got it.
Tell Richard it's at 8, so he's there on time.
It's at 8.
Yes, it is at 8.
15.
No, they
No,
were.
it's 8.
They were
It's
telling
8.
you-
It's
Date
8.
is
So we've got to tell him
8:15.
7:45.
10:15.
10:15.
at 8 o'clock.
Would have been 15 minutes late.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Planning Board. Thank you, Jeannie.
Just so
Thank
you know,
Jeremy.
there,
Thank you, Dan.
on the agenda, there was site plan review, pre-app for the school project. That likely is not happening on that day, so
Okay.
maybe 17th.
Well, then they could.
You and me a beer, mate.
No way.
We do.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Nice
All
to
right.
see everybody.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure.
thank you. Are we all,
Are we
I
adjourned?
think we're
Are you
done.
adjourning, guys?
I don't need a motion to adjourn.
Okay, everyone, are we adjourned?
Yes, we're adjourned, I think. Do we?